Freedom of conscience and religion is being challenged by laws and regulations imposed by secular society. It's time to hear from the top Christian litigators in the nation who have come forward to tell us the truth and help us defend our faith.
Hear ye, hear ye. All rise. Faith on Trial with Defender of the Faith, Deacon Mike Mano, is in session.
And good Thursday morning from the Iowa Catholic Radio Studios in West Des Moines. I'm Deacon Mike Mano, and I'm here with Gina Knoll. Gina, how are you this morning?
I'm doing well, Deacon Mike. Signs of spring in the air.
Right.
A beautiful, or signs of summer, actually. We've gotten through Easter week,
right,
and so it feels like we're on to summer. The neighbors took the cover off their pool.
Our white Easter.
Our white Easter, I know.
We had, yeah.
Well, and Drake Relays is coming up this weekend,
That's right.
So we're getting there.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm going to a ball game this Saturday over the iCubs. So that'll be kind of fun. Yeah.
Is that the season opener, or have they
no,
already played this year?
I think they've already been playing, but it's something that the Knights Council at St. Augustine's is setting up. And so there's about 40 of us, I guess, going over there with our families and going to have a nice evening at the ballpark.
No better place to have fun with a family.
That's right.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. I saw in the news that there's quite a debate over what is freedom of speech, which we talk about here every week.
I think the criticism of Elon Musk says it all. Well, I mean, that's the debate right there.
There's all kinds of people describing what the First Amendment means to them, and
that's
I'm
right.
really enjoying it.
And you let this guy take over, and you know what they can do? They can shut out one candidate, and he can turn up another. Yeah, we know that. We've experienced that. We've seen that.
All right, or silence people of faith.
That's right.
That happened remember the Tea Party was kind of shut down even before COVID, so it's very interesting to watch.
And the New York Post was knocked off Twitter and couldn't post the story they had of Hunter Biden.
Right. That's a very perfect example of the hostility towards the First Amendment.
Freedom of speech in the First Amendment, as I've mentioned before, is the keystone to religious freedom, because we cannot evangelize if we're going to be shut down all the time.
Exactly. Today we're going to talk about speech that's not necessarily something we want our children to hear.
Yeah. Dr. Jay Richards from the Heritage Foundation is going to talk about what this transgender stuff is doing to our children. And
reading through the materials, I noticed that it's very relevant to what we've got going on here in Iowa with the leaked footage and soundtrack of our teachers or administrators in the schools trying to indoctrinate our children and not caring what the law might be. That's right.
And they don't want to educate the children as much as they want to indoctrinate them. And that's why, we're one of the lowest ones in the world for literacy or academic excellence. And yet they all know how to do certain things.
Well, I'll be anxious to hear how these individuals that are working in our schools, where they came from and how they developed their ideology that they're sharing with our children.
Did you read the article I sent you on the gay clothes closets in the schools?
In the schools.
We'll talk to Jay about that. You got a prayer for us to open with?
I do. Let's open with a prayer for peace today. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. God of peace, bring your peace to our violent world, peace in the hearts of all men and women, and peace among the nations of this earth. Turn to your way of love those whose hearts and minds are consumed with hatred. Strengthen us all in hope, and give us the wisdom and courage to work tirelessly for a world where true peace and love reign among nations and in the hearts of all. Amen.
Thank you, Gina. We will be right back in 2 minutes after these messages. You're listening to Faith on Trial on Iowa Catholic Radio.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio provided by Mercy College of Health Sciences, where you can chart your course for more.
They provide unparalleled clinical rotations, hands-on learning, accelerated education, and flexible schedules, all part of the Mercy College experience.
Learn more at mchs.edu.
Amazon Smile is a simple way to support Iowa Catholic Radio. When you are shopping on Amazon, consider shopping through Amazon Smile instead. You get all the same great deals, and your order will also help support Iowa Catholic Radio. All you need to do is choose Iowa Catholic Radio as your nonprofit to support when you first log in, and Amazon will do the rest. Every Amazon Smile order you make, Amazon will donate to Iowa Catholic Radio. Support Iowa Catholic Radio while you shop at smile.amazon.com. And thank you for supporting Iowa Catholic Radio.
At noon, Monday through Friday, the doctor is in. Dr. Ray Garendi helps you with personal problems and professional questions. You'll love his fun approach and practical advice. The doctor is in on the Iowa Catholic Radio Network, connecting listeners with Christ.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio is provided by CTO. What great news for donors to the Catholic Tuition Organization. You now receive 75%. Yes, 75% of your donation back in Iowa tax credits beginning January 1st of this year. Your support has helped thousands of students attend our Catholic schools. Best gift ever. Online, ctoiowa.org. At CTO, the bottom line, it's for the kids and their future.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio provided by Paul Martin and Paul Mitchell, owners of Imogene Ingredients. Imogene Ingredients supply specialized feed ingredients for livestock and pet diets to improve maternal and young animal health in both conventional and organic production. And we're back. This is the Faith on Trial, Iowa Catholic Radio, and we have with us right now Jay Richards, who is with the Heritage Foundation, the DeVos Center for Life, Religion, and Family Life. Jay, how are you this morning?
Just fine, thanks.
Certainly. Well, we're happy to have you here. This is, I think, your first time with our program, so we'll kind of treat you nice if we can.
Yes, welcome.
Sure.
Yeah,
Thanks.
We don't want to make things too bad for you. Let's talk about some of what's going on with this transgender movement in schools and teaching our kids to be transgendered.
Yeah, I mean, and honestly, this is people should be forgiven for maybe not being able to keep up with this because it's been mostly subterranean until recently, and it's now broken out into the public consciousness. So many listeners may have heard about. Of course, we've all seen the news stories of biological males, otherwise known as boys,
right,
competing against girls in high school and college sports. That's a manifestation of this. Another manifestation of this is these lessons on so-called gender identity that find their way all the way down into kindergarten classrooms. And this is basically the idea. If people are wondering, okay, what exactly is being said here? You could call it the transgender movement, but in some ways that's almost too limiting because initially the debate was about a rare person, very rare problem which somebody has called gender dysphoria, in which a boy thinks that he's a girl for some reason, right? And that's a condition. It's an extremely rare condition until recently. What's happened now, though, with the idea of gender identity is that could be basically anything. It could be someone that thinks a boy that thinks he's a girl. It could be someone that says they're non-binary or asexual or gender fluid. The options are almost limitless. And what's happened is there's this ideology that our biological sex, that is, our creation is male and female, it's not a fundamental reality. What the fundamental reality is this subjective perceived gender identity that we all supposedly have, and it's entirely independent of our bodies. That's the philosophy that's behind all these weird movements that are now cropping up in places like Florida on the school board levels, and that we're seeing in the national news with sports.
And Disney.
And Disney, absolutely. I mean, honestly, I feel like in some ways what happened with Disney, what happened with Will Thomas, now known as Leah Thomas at the University of Pennsylvania, the swimmer that won the 500 freestyle in NCAA tournaments, it's making people aware of just how radical and I would say deranged this ideology is. I mean, we really are, in some ways, this isn't a sectarian dispute. It's not even a kind of culture war dispute. We're now at the point where we're disputing mammalian biology in a political context.
Yeah. And what is the definition of a woman that was asked recently and couldn't be answered? It appears to me that a lot of what is going on in schools, especially, is kind of grooming the younger children. I know I've got a little goddaughter who's 5 years old and who's really a pistol. I mean, you can't keep up with her.
And smart.
But she does things that you would think in other generations you might call it kind of like a tomboy.
Yes.
And I'm looking at her and I'm thinking, if she were in a public school, she's not, she's in a Catholic school, but if she were in a public school, I wonder if there might not be some suggestions dropped on her that maybe you're not really comfortable as a girl.
I mean, that's exactly the worry that you ought to have. I mean, I can say the same thing. Our daughter's one was, you'd think of her as a tomboy. She liked Legos. She liked, she liked playing sports. I don't remember that she had dolls. Of course, she's a girl. She's just sort of atypical in this way. But now with this idea of gender identity, because as I said, it's entirely subjective. It's this idea that's in your head. Most kids don't have this idea in their head. But as you said, this is a form of ideological grooming, because you take a kindergartner, one of the first things kids need to learn is the difference between adults and kids and between boys and girls. And rather than helping reinforce this perception we all have, you tell them, no, some boys aren't boys and some girls aren't girls and some are both or neither or somewhere in between, which is literally, that's the text of a popular kindergarten read-along book right now that a lot of schools are using, that introduces an idea they wouldn't otherwise have. And it sort of introduces them to this whole conceptual framework in which your, quote, gender identity is entirely independent of your biology and your body. Well, so how do you determine what someone's gender identity is? Well, if you look at the questionnaires, it's all gender stereotypes. And so, well, you're a girl, you don't like dolls, you like sports, you like building things. Those are obviously just gender stereotypes. That's not what makes you a boy or a girl. But if that's all you have, then those become evidence that maybe you have a different gender identity than your sex body. This is just, I can't think of anything more insidious to be teaching a 5-year-old child.
Yeah.
So, Jay, I have friends, close friends that are teachers, and I can't even imagine their wanting to be in this arena of teaching this to their students. So help me understand who these teachers, to me, it would be an isolated situation where this would be happening in a classroom, but it sounds like it's more than that. So where are these teachers coming from, and how are they being educated to educate?
Well, and so a lot of this is a key thing, is that you really need to have complete transparency in what's happening in schools. As you said, I mean, in Iowa, certainly the average public school teacher and elementary school teacher isn't really interested in doing this. On the other hand, almost all of them that have gone to teachers college recently have gotten this ideology. We spent years, this has been working its way through our educational institutions for years. And so it's the sort of current thing. It wouldn't have been the current thing, in the 1980s or the 1990s. And more, unfortunately, teachers are doing this. And it may not be in the official curriculum. So you might say, well, I'll go and look and see what the official curriculum is in my kid's school. What it does, it comes through teacher training. So there's all sorts of continuing education and teacher training opportunities. And a lot of this stuff is being introduced there. So it's hard to track unless you know exactly what's being taught in a classroom.
And it appears that in a lot of schools, they're hiding this from the parents, what is going on. There was a story that came across the wire a couple of days ago about these, I guess they're called transsexual closets or whatever in schools where kids go. If I'm a boy, I go to school. My mom drops me off as a boy, and there's a closet I can go to and change into girls' clothes and change my pronoun for the day, and then change back when mom comes to pick me up again, and nobody says anything to the parents.
That's right, and that's called social transitioning. That's the first step in what literally the Biden White House and the Department of Health and Human Services now defines gender-affirming care as first social transition. So that means everyone treats the boy as if he's a girl and calls her by a girl name, and then that moves to puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones and eventually into surgery. And for a lot of people, this sounds so bizarre and exotic that they can't imagine it's happening in their schools. They think that, well, this is something that's happening in Berkeley, California. Well, there's a mom in Tallahassee, Florida, suing her school district right now because they did this to their daughter. They sent their 14-year-old daughter to school. She said that she had a cross-sex identity. They changed her name. They treated her as if she was a boy, and they hid it from the parents. And in some states, that's actually official policy. You treat the parent as if he or she is a sort of regressive entity that would prevent the child from becoming his or her true self. And that's a truly radical situation in which you have the school coming at enmity between the relationship of the parents and child, which is another reason we need absolute transparency.
Yeah, it seems to me that's one of the things you want to do if you want to destabilize a society is get between kids and their parents.
Yes, in fact, I think that's the best way to understand this because, I mean, I'm a philosopher by trade, and so I spend a lot of time sort of analyzing gender ideology, and it falls apart really quickly in terms of being a coherent worldview. But that's not how people should understand it. You should look at it as a cultural wrecking ball. It's designed to destroy the institutions of society, starting with the family, which is the fundamental cell of society, in hopes that some grand new utopia will come in its place. Think of it, though, as a cultural wrecking ball rather than a consistent philosophy.
Yeah, and this has the imprimatur of the administration right now.
It does, and that's what's so terrifying. I mean, it'd be one thing if this was just happening in random schools, but this now is the Health and Human Services 2 weeks ago issued guidelines defining so-called gender-affirming care, and all 50 attorneys general, state attorneys general, got a letter from the administration a couple of weeks ago telling them that if they prohibit this, that is, so that if a state prohibits cross-sex hormones for teenage girls, which can sterilize them, that the state could be violating the child's civil rights. So at the national level, the administration is defining proper health care for kids with gender dysphoria in terms of what I've often called the school to sterilization pathway, which, again, it sounds like it can't possibly be happening, but anybody can go to the HHS website and see this document for themselves.
It's interesting that they determined that children, I guess as young as 6 or 5 years old, can make their own determinations about this, but the parents can't. the kids have the choice, but the parents aren't involved.
No, that's right. And that's the craziness about gender ideology is that your gender identity is something that's purely inside your head. So you might have a daughter that you've raised for 12 years. You'd think the knowledge that you have a daughter is pretty certain. And then a child who gets these ideas on TikTok and gets it reinforced at school can suddenly tell you that, no, she's not a girl. She's a boy or she's some other thing. That's why I think ultimately this is a philosophy that can't succeed long-term because it strikes at something that's so fundamental to us, but I think it could do a huge amount of damage in the short run.
What is the damage that is being done to these kids? Is long-term damage? Let's say you have a kid that's in school and he's exposed to this, and he's been there a couple of years before you find out what's going on, and so you pull him out and put him in a private school. What's the long-term damage there that the kid's going to have to reckon with to put his life back together?
Well, statistically, we can say we know this, that the vast majority of kids prior to puberty that have gender dysphoria, and it's a rare thing, but the ones that do, the vast majority basically grow out of it. Puberty seems to be a cure for this in many cases, as long as the child's allowed to kind of continue in a normal pathway. If you move them into quote gender-affirming transition, though, social transition, followed by puberty blockers, they're very unlikely to get off the train track. So that this affirming care it essentially puts kids on a fast track to full transition. And that can happen just from the social affirmation because, I mean, you're literally dealing with kids' perception of reality.
Exactly. And I've seen that some of these kids, it's an attention grabber, you know. They're celebrated almost as much as the star quarterback on the football team or the prom queen or the homecoming king. At that point, they're trapped in that particular
and it's not
identity.
Prom queen anymore; it's prom royalty.
Oh, sorry,
you know?
I'm not up to the language here. But you understand that social affirmation is, if they change their mind, it would be devastating to them socially.
Absolutely. I mean, I think what's happening in many cases is we're dealing with the social contagion. So most of the kids that end up in this, they have some other so-called comorbidities. So they might have social anxiety. They might be on the autism spectrum. They might be suffering some severe depression. Or as one parent of a child like this told me, she said, it's the odd child. And so it's the child that's not fitting in. And if she suddenly declares this transgender identity, the institutions of the school that you're transformed to celebrate this sort of thing. And so there's a massive amount of affirmation. And so then it'd just be very, very hard when there's all those positive incentives to say a couple of years later, I've changed my mind, because then they're just the awkward kid that maybe needs some psychological help. And so that's what, I honestly, some people on the other side really think they're helping these kids, but whether they think that or not, they're not helping them, because if you want to help a child, the child has to be able to deal with reality as it actually is. You're not helping a child by cultivating what is effectively a delusion.
And what recommendation would you have for parents who find themselves into this position?
If you're a parent in this position, you've got to find a pediatrician and a therapist that is not already committed to gender-affirming care. Most parents that initially reach out, they just call their pediatrician. Their pediatrician may actually be told by the American Academy of Pediatrics that they're to absolutely affirm this new gender identity. So you got to find a pediatrician that will be open and not already committed to affirming care. And the same thing with therapists. And then you absolutely need to find out what's happening in schools. A lot of this, you don't want to, if you can, have to deal with it after the fact. You want to deal with it preemptively. And that requires finding out what social media groups and platforms your children are involved in, and finding out exactly what's being taught in their classrooms, because those are the two main information pathways by which kids get these ideas.
And if any of our listeners want to follow you at the Heritage Foundation, how do they do that?
Just check me out and write a bunch about this stuff at heritage.org, and people can also follow me on Twitter at Dr. J. Richards. Very good.
Thank you very much for joining us. Unfortunately, we're out of time for the day, but we appreciate your words, and we'll have you back, because this is going to be a situation that's going to continue on and on for quite a while, I think.
I think you're right, unfortunately. Great to be with you.
Jay, thank you very much. God bless you. Mm-hmm. We're going to take a short break right now. You're listening to Faith on Trial on Iowa Catholic Radio.
At Intervisions Healthcare, we see patients with unplanned pregnancies from ages 12 to 43. An unplanned pregnancy is traumatic at any age. For that reason, we specialize in educating, encouraging, and empowering vulnerable and at-risk mothers facing an unexpected pregnancy with the medical information and services necessary for them to make an informed decision. For more information on the free medical services at Intervisions Healthcare, or to support our mission or become a volunteer, visit ivhcare.org.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio is provided by the Sarah Vocations Ministry. Sarah is an apostolate dedicated to the support of new and existing vocations to the priesthood and consecrated life. Learn more at joinsarah.org, joinserra.org.
Jimmy, do you take Judy to be your wife? To have and to hold? Uh-huh. For richer or poorer?
Okay.
Are you listening, Jimmy?
Jimmy?
Till death do you part?
Sure, right after I finish putting up this wall between us. There.
Jimmy, you're not dead yet.
When you use artificial contraception, it's like putting a wall between you and your spouse. Couples who instead regulate fertility naturally experience happier marriages and are less likely to divorce. Tear down the wall.
A message from Iowa Catholic Radio.
Hello, Steve Ray here. Join me along with Iowa Catholic Radio's Matt Wilcom and Father P.J. McManus for our Footprints of God Holy Land Pilgrimage, November 11th through the 20th, 2023. We'll see the Church of the Visitation, touch the top of Calvary, and visit the famous Western Wall. Plus, I'll be right there with you the whole time to bring the Bible to life at every site. Don't miss the Iowa Catholic Radio's 15th anniversary Holy Land Pilgrimage. Early bird pricing is available. Details at iowacatholicradio.com.
And we're back. You're listening to Faith on Trial on Iowa Catholic Radio. Gina, what an eye-opening interview that was.
And it's growing. When we first started this program, so many years ago, we would discuss these things were happening on either coast, and you would always end the program with, the reason we're sharing with you is because this will eventually creep into the center of the country, and it really has.
Mm-hmm. And that's where it goes. And I like his suggestion that this is a wrecking ball to society.
I 100% agree.
Because this is the foundation.
I think
of
a lot
our
of
society.
the paradigm for our parents and our families was disrupted when we allowed the schools to become the parents and believed that we were doing something good for the children, rather than empowering the parents to be better parents to our students and help parents understand they're the primary educator of their student.
Interesting thing is that if it wasn't for the COVID shutdown, we probably wouldn't know about a lot of this.
I think that really escalated the involvement of parents.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think it did. You got something for us?
I do. I have a couple of news items for our listeners. Members of the Christian Legal Society chapter at the University of Idaho are being sued or are suing their school because they were their First Amendment rights were violated. Their group, which is a Christian group, affirmed the belief that marriage is between a man and a woman, and the school
that's verboten
has shut them down.
And they issued a no contact order that the people that have been complaining about that they can't talk to them.
Yeah, and we've had a couple of cases here in Iowa at the University of Iowa that the courts have continued to affirm the students'
And this is a law school that's doing this, and they didn't read the law that came out of the Iowa cases.
Or they're just trying to punish the organization by filing suit. I mean, it costs them money. It allows them to not operate the way they normally would. We used our legal system as a weapon, from my view, anyway. And then the University of New Mexico was ordered to pay $365,000 to settle a lawsuit because a woman was killed after an abortion, a late-term abortion, in a clinic there at the university.
That they recommended to her, the university. This woman was pregnant, apparently a student, was pregnant. The university directed her to this place. And the result of the late-term abortion was she died.
And that's very interesting because, I'm following this D.C. case where the 5 babies were, dead baby bodies were found. This particular doctor had the same scenario a couple of times. And nothing was ever done about it. He continues to operate his abortion clinic. So this is not uncommon, but we don't hear about it in the news.
No, and following up on last week's program about the changes in the California law and the Maryland law. It's a very similar thing. And we had talked earlier about the Maryland law. We didn't have all the nuts and bolts of it, but it's very similar to what we talked about in California last week. And there's an attorney out there who says that if Gosnell was working not in Philadelphia but in California, if this bill passes and he was working there, he could not have even been investigated.
Right. What he would have been doing was legal. Do you have a prayer for us to end the show?
Yes, I do. St. Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle. Be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, Prince of the host,
by the power
of God, thrust into hell Satan and all the evil spirits who roam about the world, seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. Thank you for getting me over my... and
it's hard to read.
Right. And thank you, everybody who's listening out there. We will be back next week with another edition of Faith on Trial. Gina will be gone, but we will have somebody in who will try to replace her. All right. See you next week.
Our freedom of conscience and religion is being challenged by laws and regulations imposed by secular society. Faith on Trial, with Defender of the Faith, Deacon Mike Mano. Faith on Trial, Thursdays at 10 a.m. on Iowa Catholic Radio, iowacatholicradio.com, and the Iowa Catholic Radio app.